In this video, we're going to demonstrate a more advanced tactic to cleaning the window. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the fastest guys that we've ever had working for us still do the straight pulls, which essentially is considered the basic method. And basically, that's the one I tend to use more than not. It definitely has a much better deliverance in the way of quality. And as far as the speed advantages go, I think they're debatable at best. But with that said, we still want to show you the advanced technique to cleaning a window. And we also call it the S-swirl or the butterfly technique. So essentially it starts the same way. Basically, you're going to wet down the glass, and this is a post-construction job, so we're going to either use a razor or we're going to use steel wool to get off the caked on debris from the construction process. From there, we're going to wet down the window just as we always would. And it essentially alleviates the requirement to have to do individual swipes. It's kind of done in all one motion, and the squeegee never leaves the glass once you start the motion itself. Now, one limitation that definitely comes about as a result of cleaning with the S or the butterfly technique is it on occasion can leave just a slight little bead of water as you're doing a swipe from side to side. And something to consider is if it's in a location or a window that's very high priority, say a master bedroom window or anything that's elevated or south facing where the sun's going to come up behind it, it's really important that we absolutely nail the quality aspect of cleaning those sorts of windows. So that might not be the best place to use the S or the butterfly technique. Now, if it's a basement window or if it's north facing where the sun's never going to hit it, or it's a window that's moderately sized, those are definitely areas where you can use it a little bit with a little bit more confidence. Now, one thing to note, it shouldn't be before a month or even two of doing the basic technique before you dive into trying out the S technique. It's simply going to be counterproductive, and it's important to learn how to walk before you learn how to run. So as a foundation or a fundamental, it's important that you spend a decent amount of time and become very competent cleaning with the basic technique. And then when time allows for it, you can try and progress your skill set in order to encapsulate the S technique. At this point, I want to go over the micro movements that are involved in doing the S technique or the butterfly. Now, there's a lot of similarities in terms of comparing it to the basic technique. Essentially, we're going to start out the exact same. We're going to wet down every square inch of the window. And remember, this is the time when the cleaning actually takes place. So if you need to, you got to get a little aggressive with it. And if needed, you can use steel wool or a razor to facilitate in the cleaning efforts. At this point, we're going to clean off the three edges of the squeegee rubber, just as we always do. And it's never a bad idea to clean off the sides of the glass prior to diving in on this technique, just like so. Again, clean and dry portion of the rag is absolutely crucial. From there, we got our dry squeegee rubber ready to go. And it's really important to realize that although the orientation is going to change as you pass over the glass, you want to maintain the same angle of the heel of the squeegee against the glass. When you run into trouble is when it gets further away, and then it'll kind of chatter the rubber. The other thing is you want to put your thumb on this pad here, and that'll disperse pressure evenly on either sides of the channel itself. So from there, it's just a matter of essentially looking at where you want to go prior to arriving at that location. And when you come down, you almost want to pull it up and then over, like so. And Of course, the leading edge is constantly changing, so you have to be aware that it's going to switch at a fairly rapid pace. And again, if you ever have to touch anything up, remember you have to start on a sill and you have to end on a sill. I'm gonna dry this off, and you can continue on like so. What really helps in this technique is if your water is a little bit soapier, that allows it to kind of lubricate the window and it'll glide much easier. From there, you're simply going to dry off the edges, as you always would, and the ledges and the sills to make sure it all looks good. So one more time, again, we're going to wet it down. And if I had this screen out, it's already been cleaned, but if I had it out, I would do both at the same time. Again, that's called batching, and it goes a lot quicker that way. We're gonna dry off the 3 sides with the dry and clean portion of the rag. And you can either start down below or up top. It makes no difference, but you do want to start in the dry buffer zone. And then it's just a matter of coming back and forth. Again though, this is not as effective as the straight pull method, so you got to be really on your game when it comes to evaluating your work. And if there's any touch-up required, it's very important that you either get it with the rag if it's small, or re-wet that portion of the glass and start on a sill and end on a sill. Past that, we're going to dry it all off, and that is a clean window. Now I want to show you some precautions that we have to consider when we're doing post-construction window cleaning. So I'm going to go through them very quickly, but they're all super, super important. First and foremost, when we're getting called to do a post-construction window clean, chances are we're one of the last trades to be on the property before it gets handed off to the new owners. So it's really, really important that we deliver a high level of service, as well that we are not bringing the property down in any regard, because essentially next people to take it over could be the new homeowners. So first and foremost, when I come inside to do a post-construction window cleaning, very important, take off your shoes, as we do with any interior window cleaning. Now, as you can tell, everything is very clean, and that's maybe not always the case, but sometimes it is the case where the cleaners have already come in. So you got to be very aware of that. I want to show you something right here. These little green pieces of tape are basically signifying what needs to happen in the way of touch-ups. So there was a slight little blemish and it was noticed, and now basically the painters have to come back and touch it up. It's to that degree that these sorts of projects are under scrutiny. So again, if you're walking around with your gear belt, make sure that it does not flop around and make contact with a wall or inside of a door jamb. You name it, it's really important that we don't cause any sort of damage. Another thing I want to show you here is the track of this window. Now we've already cleaned the inside of the window, and you can tell the track is looking really, really clean. It's important to realize, especially with post-construction window cleaning projects, that the track is part of the window itself. So it's very, very important that if it's dirty, we get it looking as clean as possible, or at least to the standard that the contractor is looking for. Now, there is varying levels of dirtiness when it comes to the tracks. Sometimes they actually have cleaners that come through and focus on cleaning that aspect of the home prior to our arrival. And then we also have projects where essentially nothing's been done and they're chocked full of drywall debris and sawdust and dust and you name it. So in that case, it's always a good idea at the very least to wipe it down with the surgical towel, or even potentially bring a shop vac. And we do have a shop vac available, and it has the tiny little heads on it that allow you to get into the very detailed places of a track. Another thing I want to show you over here, I'm just going to have to extend out. Over here in the top left corner of the window, there's actually a little label. So yeah, this is super common with new windows to have stickers or labels on them, and it's very important that when we remove them, that we make a conscious effort to take them out with us. We are not the type of company that just take off labels like that and just leave them, especially if the property is essentially on its way to being delivered to the homeowner. So it's very, very important when we're taking labels off that we make a conscious effort to just put them in our pocket and then throw them away when we exit the property. The final thing I want to mention is the eggshell paint that is often used in the new builds now, and the sills here. So essentially this window needs to be accessed with a ladder, and it's very important that you recognize if you put your hand on eggshell paint and if you've been handling a ladder all day, it's actually going to leave a mark. And again, it's a very small detail, but it can cause a huge amount of damage or a callback if it's not given adequate attention. So if at all possible, avoid making contact directly with any sort of eggshell paint or wall in general. And it's very, very important that you lay down a couple towels along the sill here to make sure that no drips are left to stain either the sill or drip down and hit any of the wall below. Again, it can come off as a little overbearing here, I understand, but it's just really, really important to recognize that these are brand new homes that we're being given the trust and responsibility of, and it's very important that we certainly deliver a high level of service and we are not detrimental in any other regard of the presentation of the building itself. Now with the post-construction cleans, there's always a varying level in terms of how dirty the windows actually get. Some contractors do an impeccable job of keeping the glass relatively clean throughout the building process. And then in other locations, it can essentially resemble that we're kind of digging the glass out of stucco debris and caulking and any sort of drywall dust that gets caked on there, or even labels themselves. So lots of times we do have to use razors and steel wool. Now when you're using razors, again, it's super important that you recognize that they can cause damage, particularly if you're using them on a door like this or deck glass railings like what you see outside there. Now, unfortunately, sometimes they put labels on pieces of glass that are part of safety glass or that are tempered glass. And you have to be very, very cognizant of the potential for damage there. So if that is the case, you might have to use steel wool, and you also might have to use Goo Gone to generally remove the label or the piece of debris that you're trying to get off the glass. And again, just recognize the importance of not using a razor on any sort of tempered glass, safety glass, anything that has an etching, or if it's a deck glass railing. As well, it's always a good idea to make sure that your razor blade is in fine working order, and if needed, you can simply just flip it around and start on a brand new surface, or you can swap it out altogether. The worst thing that you can have is an old crusty razor that's rusted and chipped and bent, and apply that to brand new glass in a new build. And one other thing I want to mention before we conclude this video is a lot of times with post-construction window clean jobs, we're given exclusive access to get inside of the home itself. So it's very important that we acknowledge that trust and deliver at a high level. So if we're given a garage door code or a physical key, we have to make sure that all the doors are locked before we leave the premise because we don't want to be held responsible if something were to go wrong.